Thank you for joining our Rieti Brown Backward webinar. I'm H. Tomiura, President of Rieti. I will be serving as the moderator of today's webinar. Today, we are truly honored to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Choi Shin-kwon, Director and Chief Executive Officer of ISEAS, Yusof Ishak Institute, and head of ASEAN Studies Center, and head of Singapore APEC Studies Center. Mr. Choi will deliver a lecture titled Southeast Asia and Japan, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. After Mr. Choi's presentation, Professor Aizawa Nobuhiro, a Graduate School of Social and Cultural Studies of Kyushu University, and the Managing Director and Dean of ERIA School of Government will provide comments. Today's video and presentation materials will be posted on the Rieti website at a later date. Please note that this webinar is being held under the so-called Chatham House rule. Mr. Choi, please start your presentation. You have about 40 minutes.
Thank you very much, Professor Tomiura, and also thank you to Rieti for inviting me to make this presentation. I'm very happy to be able to do so. So perhaps let me start straight away with the introduction. This seminar, if I can have the next slide. So this seminar comes at a time when my institute has just released the State of Southeast Asia survey, which has been released in a webinar 2 weeks ago. And most of the media that have been reporting on the survey results have focused only on one result, which has to do with the choice of the respondents between US and China. However, there are actually many things in this survey result that is worthy to look closer at. And so in this particular seminar, I will be looking at the issue of the survey results as it pertains to Japan. And maybe I can also just start by explaining why we have chosen this topic, or why we have entitled this seminar with this title. And that is because when we look at the Southeast Asians' relationship with Japan, there are many, many good things, many things that are very positive. But like all real life, it is never so neat and so straightforward. And so the title for this seminar actually borrows the name from a very long ago 1960s spaghetti western entitled in English, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Because life is not so neat, characters are often not so perfect, and characterizations of them have always got to be mixed. So, and that also is a good description of the relationship between Japan and Southeast Asia. There is good, definitely a lot of good. There is some factors that are not so good, that maybe even can be said to be bad. And there are some contradictions and some conflicts, and could say that they are the ugly things. So let me just go on to say that on the whole, over the period that we have seen Japan relating to Southeast Asia, Japan has done a lot, especially over the last 5.5 to 6 decades. And if we remember, in the past, Japan had a rather more unfavorable reputation within Southeast Asia. However, that low base is now totally erased, as the results of the survey will show. Having said that, despite the fact that there's a wonderful track record, the conditions going forward from this year, 2024, actually are going to be very different from what they have been 6 decades ago, or even 1 decade ago. So it is important that both Japan and Southeast Asia are mindful of this, and that different approaches need to be taken because of these different circumstances. And I will start by my first section really looking at what is Southeast Asia conditions right now. So if we look at the Southeast Asia, there are some concerns that I want to draw attention to everyone in the audience. Number one, I think that Southeast Asia is concerned about the economy. And number two, Southeast Asia is concerned about climate change. Before I describe what's on the slide, let me just say that as a summary. But I also say that it's important for us to look at the great uncertainty underlying all this, and that is the geopolitics, especially on the US-China relations, because that is behind the choices. It is in the mind of the respondents when they go through this survey and select their response. So now I'll just show you a couple of the responses on the slides. One of the questions we asked in this survey is, what are the top challenges going forward in 2024 that are facing Southeast Asia? And you can see from the results in the slide that actually the top three are the same as the top three from last year. The top one is unemployment and economic recession. Almost 60% chose this. So there is still a lot of focus on the economy among the Southeast Asians' minds. Secondly, and this is important to take note, climate change and extreme weather events is also very high. So describing first these are the concerns, if you like, at the country level and across the region. The next slide is another question which looks at what are the top concerns of the respondents about ASEAN. ASEAN as an organization, as a intergovernmental organization, what are the concerns about that organization? And again, the results are quite consistent from previous years. The top concern is that ASEAN is slow and ineffective. And in particular, it is unable or unwilling to deal with the fluid political developments, geopolitical developments, and also the geo-economic developments, and therefore risks being irrelevant. Second of that is also that ASEAN itself is becoming an arena where major powers are actually competing, and that the member states of ASEAN may become nothing more than proxies, may become the contest ground for great powers to want to induct proxies into their contest against each other. And then the third one is about economic growth again. So let me elaborate a little bit on this. I think that Southeast Asia, the economy going forward to 2024 is affected by several issues, some internal and some external. The internal issues, they have to do with the pandemic. There has been scarring from the pandemic. Many Southeast Asian countries had spent a lot of government expenditure during this period to deal with the crisis, to deal with the fact that there was a lot of interruption in the economy. And so there are some fiscal limitations going forward. And this will continue to be there for some time. In the longer term, there's also some scarring that has to do with the way that education has been disrupted for a generation, some for as long as 2 to 3 years. And this will also have its effect in the longer run. And of course, there's also the intermediate kind of issues which has to do with the workforce. Many companies during the pandemic had to basically trim down their workforce in order for companies to survive. And so workers that were already trained to do something were without a job. And later on, when companies want to revive, they take time to recruit workers and to train them again. So these are kind of the pandemic-related economic issues. But there are also longer-term issues that have nothing to do with the pandemic, but which pertain to where Southeast Asia now is, which has to do with the total factor productivity of the Southeast Asian economies. Countries in Southeast Asia are concerned about getting rich before they get old because there are demographic challenges. Externally, I think I have also already mentioned, there are geopolitical tensions to deal with. There are disruptions due to supply chains and global value chains. And there's also the problem of China, because China has been going through a slowdown. This has affected Southeast Asia, and also the over-dominance of China in some of the economies in Southeast Asia is also a matter that the region has to deal with. So very briefly, the climate change issues in Southeast Asia are also things that have to be grappled with quite seriously by the economies here. These concerns particularly have to do with the energy transition, because while Southeast Asia had been able to achieve relatively smooth economic growth over the past few decades, the energy transition is an unprecedented new factor that requires them to make extraordinary changes and also extraordinary expenditure with the introduction of new technologies. And dealing with the consequences of climate change is also one factor that the Southeast Asian countries will have to deal with. I would just mention that while there are some assistance programs, such as the Just Energy Transition Program or JETP programs that are already in existence for Vietnam and Indonesia, they are running into implementation problems and also financing issues. It is not so much that there is no money. The money sometimes is there, but it's difficult to unlock, and also is in perhaps the wrong place, and the obstacles are not so easy to overcome and may not also be enough. So besides Vietnam and Indonesia, the other countries in Southeast Asia also face similar issues. So this is what I like to plant in the back of all our minds as we even look at how Japan is being looked to, and also the opportunity that Japan has in trying to help Southeast Asia through its current series of issues. So the next section, I'd like to talk about how is Japan being positioned in Southeast Asian eyes as reviewed by the survey. So I'll start with this section, which I call the good. Next slide, please. So on this, I will run through a few of the survey findings. This one that is on the slide now is a question that is been in the survey for a number of years, and what it does is try to map the trust and distrust ratings of all the respondents from Southeast Asia in this survey. As you can see in the red box on the left, Japan is and actually has been the most trusted major power by Southeast Asia in the region, and this is something that is remarkable in terms of comparison over the long run from 5-6 decades ago, but it is also stable today in that all the years of the survey being run, Japan has been in this position. If you look at all the other countries that are being mentioned here, all the other major powers, that Japan is ahead of the US, Japan is ahead of the EU, Japan is ahead of China, and is well ahead of India. And this unique position is something that we should bear in mind. It is both a credit to Japan, but also, if you like, a kind of responsibility. The next slide, we look at a similar finding the question was, how confident are the respondents that Japan will do the right thing to contribute to global peace, security, prosperity, and governance? And among those who chose either very confident or confident is almost 60%. This is an increase upon 2023, but it has always kind of been around this kind of figure consistently in the past. Those that have little or no confidence is less than 20%, and there's quite a neutral group. So almost 80% have, if you like, either a neutral or confident or very confident on Japan. The next slide shows another question which helps us to plumb a bit deeper into the reasons why there is this feeling towards Japan. Why do you trust Japan? The finding, the reason that most chosen by the respondents is that there is a strong belief that Japan is a responsible stakeholder that champions and respects international law. International law is in the interest of all the Southeast Asian countries, whether big or small, and Japan is seen to be a consistent defender of this. The second most cited reason is that Japan has vast economic resources and political will to provide global leadership. Now, this perception, perhaps to Japanese ears, may sound a bit of an exaggeration, but nevertheless, this is the perception that the Southeast Asia has. Let's go to the next slide, which looks at why, if there are any reasons why those who do not trust Japan, what would be their reasons? And remember, this is just 20% of the total group of respondents. And the main reasons are, one, that they are concerned that Japan is distracted by its own domestic issues as well as its issues within Northeast Asia. And one can recognize this readily. And the second reason cited by this 20% is that Japan does not have the capacity or the political will for global leadership. Let's go to the next slide. You see that Japan also has a tremendous amount of soft power. This question is regarding what is the country that is a favorite destination for holidays. And Japan is the choice of more than 30% of the respondents. The next comes, which is maybe just above half of the rating that chose Japan, is any ASEAN member state, which of course there are 10 of them. And a couple more slides. Next one, I'd like to highlight this because I mentioned climate change, and this particular question does not come from the State of Southeast Asia survey, but from another survey that my institute does, which is the Climate Outlook Survey for Southeast Asia. This was done last year, not this year, because this year's survey has not yet been done. And Japan is seen as leading in global climate change innovation, ahead actually of the European Union and ahead of China. And we know that actually perhaps this may be an over-reading, but nevertheless, I think this perception is quite entrenched. And the last slide that we will look at of the questions that have an answer within the surveys is the question of who do Southeast Asian respondents think can play a proactive role in sharing climate expertise and also capabilities with the respondents' countries. And again, Japan is at the top of that list, with more than a quarter of the respondents choosing Japan. And again, it is above the European Union, who, although the European Union has been doing quite a bit on this front, I think they do not actually approach or come near to where the perception of Japan is. So looking at these questions as well as some other questions which we do not have time to look at, I'd like to summarize the positives for Japan. And they are in this slide. Several issues. So Japan is familiar, trusted, and liked. So this is seen in both the aid programs as well as in the soft power, in the culture. Japan is not far away. It is familiar and trusted. Secondly, I think the belief is that Japan has adequate, in fact ample, financial resources as well as industrial capacity. And I do think that there's recognition that Japan's technology may be a bit more expensive, but nevertheless it has the ability to do industrial actions and investments. Its private sector is able to move together with the Japanese government's guidance, and this actually enables Japan to play a unique role which is not available to Western powers, which tend to operate independently between government and private sector. Thirdly, I think that we can see that Japan actually is able to work very comfortably with Western-led groups, particularly G7, and can serve as a bridge as well as an advocate from within in all those group programs that are led by G7 or some affiliated bodies. And in the slide you can see some examples of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, of the JETP programs, of the PGI, which is the infrastructure program for G7. I think that Japan is able to work with these groupings, and can be a bridge and an advocate for Southeast Asia. Fourthly, Japan has a different diplomatic approach to handling its relations with China, and in a way, because Japan is in the region and needs to have a sustained engagement with China, it will take a different approach. But at the same time, Japan does not shy away from standing up for what is important and standing up for its own interests. So this more nuanced approach that Japan adopts towards China is closer to what the Southeast Asian countries feel comfortable with, and also are pursuing themselves to a similar degree. And lastly, or fifthly, I think Japan can play a catalytic role for Southeast Asia in energy transition, because as you have seen, Southeast Asia actually has that expectation and perception that Japan is advanced in these areas, and therefore there is a window for Japan to do more. Japan has the know-how, it has the technologies to partner Southeast Asia, and it will be able to play in this next phase of economic development in Southeast Asia. Let me quickly now go on in the time that remains on a couple of things that are not so good that come out of the survey regarding the relationship. So yes, let's go to the next slide. One of the things that this survey shows us is that there is very strong optimism within ASEAN for the digital economy to grow. And this can be reflected in this question that is now seen on the slide. The ASEAN Digital Economy Framework is expected to contribute significantly to the capabilities in the region, and also to enhance regional digital trade. So another 25% believe that this will cause integration digitally within the region, and that of course this itself will then make the region much more competitive in digital initiatives and digital economy growth. There is actually an expectation that this part of the economy, digital economy, can actually expand regional GDP by a very significant number, so probably in the order of 50 to 60%. So this is a very significant new initiative. ASEAN therefore has brought forward its negotiation on this DEFA, and also gone to the extent that it wants to complete the DEFA negotiations in terms of the main points by next year, 2025. So there's a lot of optimism on DEFA. I'll say later why this is a bad thing. The next slide. So this slide looks at the concerns, the top security concerns or geopolitical concerns for Southeast Asia. And actually the top concern is Israel-Hamas. We have no time to go into why this is so. But the second one is aggressive behavior in the South China Sea. So this is actually quite marked, and I think it is something that pervades all the 10 countries, whether they are claimant states or not. So Southeast Asia is concerned about conflict actually being sparked in South China Sea. They would like to see it to be calmer, and so this security concern is part of what is registering in the front of concerns of Southeast Asia. So what does this indicate about Japan? I think that if I may summarize it, it is that Japan is seen as a laggard in digital contributions, digital initiatives, and it is also seen as a laggard in security contributions. Because the DEFA is such a high priority for ASEAN, it will be looking not just to integrate internally, but also to look for new partners beyond the region. And unfortunately, although Japan would be in a good position to be embraced on this front, it is probably not ready because of the stage at which Japan is in terms of its own digitalization and its own economy on this front. The biggest players in ASEAN today on the digital front are actually the US and China. It would very much, I believe, like to have Japan as also one of these, but it is not yet. It is laggard. It's not yet able to play this role. Secondly, I think South China Sea, as I said, is not very far behind in terms of the security concerns topmost in the minds of South Asian respondents. But Japan is really not sufficiently well positioned to play a bigger role, particularly in areas such as deterrence. Recently, of course, Japan had come up with a new program, the OSA, the Overseas Security Assistance Program. And this is playing some role in helping regional capacities to be built up on the security front, but it is not yet able to play a role in deterrence that can then actually enhance the security and also the stability in the region. Let me go to my final section in the 5 minutes that remain, and this is on this part which I have described as the ugly, or if you like, the issues which are perhaps conflicts or dilemmas. This slide shows us a new question on this survey where respondents are asked to choose and to rank dialogue partners of ASEAN in terms of its highest strategic relevance. And you can see here that Japan is third, not that far behind China and the US, who are almost neck to neck at the top. And if you look across the Japan role, you will see that almost every country except one chose Japan either as the third or above as in terms of the strategic relevance. So it is in a position, it is recognized as being very relevant to the region. Next. Despite that being the case, if you look at some other questions, you see in this slide that on the question as to who is playing, which country is the most influential economic power, Japan is not really registering very high at 3.7%. The next question, the same kind of question, but here trying to look at political and strategic influence. Japan is also not very high, only at 3.7%. And let me go on to a few other related questions. Who do you have confidence to champion the global free trade agenda? Japan is 5th in 2024 with only 9%. Next slide. The similar question, but talking about leadership in the rules-based order and international law. Again, Japan is 5th, about 9%. So these questions highlight certain points which I will summarize in this slide. If you like, the summary is that Japan is an underperformer in regional influence and leadership. And I will just talk about 3 points. The first one is obvious. It has already been seen in those slides that we've gone through. Japan actually could be, or perhaps Southeast Asia expects Japan to be actually higher in terms of economic and strategic influence, but it's not quite there. It's really quite low. And secondly, I think that Japan is seen to play a very low-key diplomatic role. It is not playing such a high-profile role on any of the conflicts that matter to the region. Myanmar, South China Sea, as well as Ukraine or Gaza. All these are issues which Japan plays a low-key diplomatic role when it could actually do more. And lastly, I would say that Japan's current climate initiatives with the region are seen to be helpful, but also seem to be tailored to be more self-serving. And this is because Japan also has its own energy security needs, and there is a noticeable tilt in some of the initiatives that Japan does on the climate change front to be also supporting Japan's own security, energy security. So I think this could be more balanced. Obviously, it's not wrong for Japan to advocate in its own interest, but the region also could see more balanced approach by Japan that can then help the region. So my time is coming to an end. Let me quickly summarize and conclude. Not to forget, Japan has done a spectacular job as a dialogue partner to ASEAN. It has built a solid reputation as a trusted power in Southeast Asia, and that's a good position to be in. But geopolitical conditions now are more complex, and regional growth, I think, is becoming more challenging for Southeast Asia. Japan, however, has a window and also a very strong foundation on which it can further strengthen its position if it adjusts its approach to all these new conditions. And it requires, I believe, Japan to play a stronger diplomatic and security role in the region, and also to work with Southeast Asia to address regional climate issues in a more altruistic way. So let me conclude there. Thank you very much.